Hello there. My name is Dr. Salim Javed and I am an associate professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Lingas Lalita Devi Institute of Management and Sciences affiliated with Guru Govind Singh in the Prasla University. We have been trying to understand cinema and we have been understanding how it has evolved as a medium, as a narrative, and we have talked about how the cinema from still images, how we achieved the first permanent still image, and then what were the developments that helped achieve make zoopraxiscope, and from zoopraxiscope how Thomas Alva Edison and William Kennedy Laurie Dixon and Lumiere brothers, and then Edwin S. Potter, and then D.W. Griffith, how their specific contribution has helped cinema as a medium to evolve and to reach up to a zenith that as we know it today. Now, this is a series that which is named as Understanding Cinema, where we have been talking about different sides. Like at length we have talked about the story format, at length we have talked about very specific topics, and for last few videos we have been talking about how cinema as a medium has started. If you remember that we have talked about Georges Méliès at length, and Georges Méliès comes from France, and how what Georges Méliès did in France is what specifically Edwin S. Potter did for American cinema, which is popularly known as Hollywood cinema. Now, if you can see your slide, it says that in France, Georges Méliès elevated French cinema to global recognition with his elegant yet static storytelling. But it was American filmmaker Edwin S. Potter, who lived from 1870 to 1941, who advanced Méliès's exploration of cinema's narrative possibility to their logical culmination. Now, when you read something like this, where you're talking about that Georges Méliès from France has done something, and then Edwin S. Potter, who is an American filmmaker, has done something. Now, let's try to understand what they have done, how style-wise they were different, how they learned from each other, how one has helped another to make more advancement in the field of filmmaking. Now, when we were talking about Georges Méliès, you know that he is one of the persons who accidentally discovered the editing per se, and then we talked at length about A Trip to the Moon, which was released in 1902, and how it globally changed the way people were watching actualities. So, one of the tracks that Thomas Alva Edison, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, and Lumiere brothers opened was Actuality, and another track which Georges Méliès accidentally opened as we know it today, what we love today, which is called cinema, is the is fantastic, is fantastic world. So Georges Méliès, but obviously when he made A Trip to the Moon, or in 1907 A Trip to the Sun also, he has been he has been labeled as very elegant, yet static storyteller. Now, why he is called static storyteller? I was saying it statistic. It's a static storyteller. Now, one of the reasons that, if you have been following the lecture series closely, it was the tableau mentality, because of which he has been labeled or branded as an static storyteller. But statistic storytelling continued for much longer time after Georges Méliès also, and in fact some part of Edwin S. Potter's work is also static. We'll be discussing about that. But so what sort of exploration of cinema narrative that Georges Méliès was able to develop, and how Edwin S. Potter was able to advance on this cinematic narrative possibilities. Let's discuss all about that. Now, as I have said that Edwin S. Potter began his career as a Vitascope projectionist and occupied, I mean this is what I have discussed, and occupied almost all important positions in the process of filmmaking. He was a producer, director, a lot of other things. So, he was first started as a Vitascope projectionist, and then he achieved gradually and up to the level of director, up to making films like The Life of an American Fireman that we have discussed at length. Now, when you talk about Edwin S. Potter, American filmmaker, now there are three people. I have talked about it, but it is for the recap purpose. Three people who has influenced him greatly. One is George Méliès. Undoubtedly, when he saw A Trip to the Moon in 1902, he started, he was thinking of his own film, and then he started shooting his own film, The Life of an American Fireman, late in 1902, and which was released in 1903. And then there were two British pioneers called G.A. Smith and James Williamson of Brighton Studio. Now, what was happening for Edwin S. Potter, that he was able to not only see cinema from France because of George Méliès. George Méliès comes from France. He was watching cinema from Britain also. G.A. Smith and James Williamson of Brighton Studio. Now, Potter's inaugural significant narrative film, as I said, was The Life of an American Fireman, which was released in 1903. Now, up till here we have discussed at length. Now, let's focus our attention on one of the masters film of silent era. Like, if you talk about silent era, there are few films. Let's reverse it from 1927, from Don Juan to The Birth of a Nation. Then you have this film, The Great Train Robbery. Then you have A Trip to the Moon, The Arrival of the Train, or The Gardener's Gardening. So, there are 5-10 most important films, that everyone must see these films. Now, Potter's subsequent picture demonstrated the cinema's potential to surpass these approaches significantly, and it was called, or it is the name of the film is The Great Train Robbery, which was released in 1903. Now, for Edwin S. Potter, 1903 is like a year when The Life of an American Fireman was released, and then The Great Train Robbery was also released. So, it was a good year for Edwin S. Potter. Now, let's try to understand what is so special about The Great Train Robbery. Why in the history of filmmaking, in every school, every film student try to understand these films, as I named them 2-3 minutes back. Why these films? What is in these films that everybody should watch and learn and assimilate these films, so that when they start making their own films? I was like, when I was making this this lecture, then I realized that sometimes information is so much available in front of you, and you read it also, you understand it also, but sometimes we are not able to categorize it. Like, suppose if you somebody comes and tells you that, okay, you are in film direction, okay, fine, very good, very good. Okay, tell me what is the treatment of the story. Now, this looks something as if somebody Steven Spielberg has to come down to your institution or college or university and sit with you and teach you that this is what is called treatment. But trust me, there are times when you see the visual form of treatment, you read it also, but you do not know, nobody tells you that this is what is called treatment. and when you pay few $1,000 actually, not rupees, and when you go to some very reputed college and then you attend 6 months there, or 1 year diploma course there, and there is where you get a strand of it, not the whole of it, a strand of it, and you feel satisfied. Oh, I paid 40 lakh rupees and this is what I am now, New York Film School returned, I know how to write treatment, and unfortunately people buy that also, people buy that also. So sometimes you have things in front of you, because most of us lack common sense, so we are not able to decode that. That's one of the ironies of us, and that is why sometimes we are bound to talk about lackluster content, even if we we are able to buy best of the services, best of the equipments in the world, but we are not able to create best of the films in the world. Now, in 1903, this film, The Great Train Robbery, was released. Now, what we are discussing, what is so great about this film. Now, as you can see on screen, The Great Train Robbery, which was released in 1903, is undisputedly recognized as Edwin S. Potter's paramount work, existing in a singular authoritative rendition. The Great Train Robbery, filmed entirely in Peterson, New Jersey, is recognized both the inaugural Western, as noted by Kenneth McGowan, the first film to capitalize on the violence associated with the armed robbery. Now, why I am asking you to read what is written on screen? Reason being that there is, like when I, or like many of us who present our lectures on CEC-UGC, sometimes we struggle how much is enough for 1 hour. And interestingly, I have reached that even one slide is more than I mean, you can talk hours through one slide, but obviously it's a format, so we really have to stick to a way. But I really want you to not only listen to it, but read it also, so that you can, if you want to make notes, you can make notes also, and these are 100% authentic notes, there is no doubt about it. So now, if I say that it's Edwin S. Potter's paramount work, why it is a paramount work? Because out of 7-8 films, that I'll be telling you, The Life of an American Fireman, and then The Great Train Robbery, and there are many more films that he was forced to make. I'll tell you why he was forced to make, and what happened, why it is called a Paramount filmmaking, Paramount film. What change Edwin S. Potter brought to the filmmaking as a whole, we'll be talking about that. Now, it is called a Paramount. Understand it like that. It is one of the most successful films, not only for Edwin S. Potter, but for the film medium per se. Why it is one of the most successful film for the film medium per se, we will be talking about that. You really have to be with me to understand that. And then there is very interesting observation by Kenneth McGowan. He says that it is one of the first films which has capitalized on the violence associated with the armed robbery. So, if you like Sholay, it is the first Sholay. Where looting is happening, and where violence is being exploited as a form of entertainment. Now, this is according to Kenneth, it's one of the first films where you are exploiting, where you are not exploiting, or rather capitalizing on violence. Now, why this film is important? There is one of the very important points, and there is where the connection between George Méliès and Edwin S. Potter is established. So, it is called continuity editing, one of the hallmarks of Hollywood style of filmmaking, continuity editing. Understand continuity editing, and when we will be talking about Soviet montage, when we will be talking about Le Kuleshov's experiment, where we will be talking about Miet, when we will be talking about the strike, when we talking about the battleship Potemkin, then you will understand then there will be a very obvious contrast established between continuity editing and montage style of film editing. So, one of the most important things that the Great Train Robbery talks about is the continuity editing, and that is one of the strength of this film. Now, so continuity editing is like, suppose somebody does not know what is continuity editing, and if you have seen any film on OTT or any serial for that matter, or any animation for that matter, and the journey was very smooth, there was no visual hiccup and things were unfolding logically one after another. So, take that as a form of continuity editing, and when you do not know how things started, where they are culminating, which scene is coming after what is the intention of the author, or author or the director, author theory I will be talking about when I will be talking about French New Wave, and then has the scene completed or not. So, when you have a haphazard, I would not use the word haphazard, sorry for using that word, when you find a order in chaos, then it becomes different sort of an editing. There are different names for it. One of the names is montage editing. There are 5 types there, from rhythmic to intellectual. We will be talking about that. So, one of the strength of this film is the continuity editing, and that is one of the most important aspect of the Great Train Robbery also. And though it lacks intercutting inside scene, portrait transition between his scenes without employing. Now this is something very different. When you see George Millier's film, the Castle or A Trip to the Moon, there are dissolves and fades are used. But when you see the Great Train Robbery, then you realize there are sharp cuts, and without allowing them to unfold to completion. Now, when you now this is something really interesting. Suppose this is what, when we get into a film school or when we get into a department of mass communication, there is where we are taught that if you are starting a scene, you really have to complete the scene and then you have to move to the next scene. Now, this is one way of doing things, but what makes the Great Train Robbery really important. Please understand, we are talking about 1903 at this point of time. The first commercial screen took place in 1895 by Lumiere's brothers in Café Capucine, and it's still in a very, I mean, we are talking about a very early stage. So, really you really have to understand that sometimes when I say that unfold, allowing them to unfold to completion, somebody says, sir, Salim sir, it's a banal statement. Oh yes, you are absolutely right. Right now it is, but think of 1903, when you do not know what possible turn this medium can take, and with every passing year you are discovering great people, great cinema, great style, great way of filmmaking, new devices, new technologies, new ways of doing things, and every new way is flabbergasting you. Every new way is taking you by surprise. Every new way is giving you a new perspective on reality. Every new way is bringing you closer to reality. Won't that be surprising enough? Like suppose today when you talk about, like, it is like uh, uh, as deep face has surprised you, you know. So that sort of a thing, you know, imagine that sort of a thing. Now imagine today I suddenly get a wand sort of a thing, you know, that I become a magician. So suddenly I become a magician, the kind of power that I hold to do things, you know, that sort of a thing was happening in terms of cinema in 1903, where people were exploring which was not explored for thousands of years. Now tell me, if I say that without allowing them to unfold to completion, now what does it mean? If I may say that, suppose if I am sitting here in this studio and without finishing this lecture, if I move and start doing something else, like suppose if I am talking to you right now and suddenly I turn, get up from my seat and start making chai. Now I have not completed my action. My action is that I supposed to finish my lecture, but suddenly I don't do it and I start doing something else, and I know only the possibility that if I have come and sit here, then I have to finish my lecture. So not finishing my lecture and forget it, start doing something else. Not finishing my lecture is not part of the prescription. All these people that I talk about, you know, be that George Millier, be that Edwin S. Potter, or I'll be talking about D.W. Griffith, and then I'll be talking about a lot of people, you know, they went beyond prescription. You know, that is what makes them different, and that is why we are talking about them here. Now, in Millier's and early Potter, all scenes reach their logical dramatic conclusion with new scenes initiated in the deliberate and slow style of 19th century theatre. That is what we will to be talking about, and there are no ellipses between scenes and no omission in the action akin to what would and might occur on a professional stage. Now, if you understand this that I have just read, if you understand this, trust me, you understand George Millier really well, you understand Edwin S. Potter really well, and you will be appreciating D.W. Griffith, Buster Keaton, uh, Charlie Chaplin, Marilyn Monroe, uh, you know, our own films. You will be understanding cinema per se. You know, I was playing with a very young boy, my son, and he said something very interesting. He did something and said that this is cinematic, and I was like surprised that why not doing like this. He did something, not doing like this is cinematic, and why doing things in a specific style, in a specific way is cinematic. He is hardly 14 years right now, but he said this is what cinematic is, and it made me really think that yes, there are cinematic ways to do things, like there are and please understand, when I say there are cinematic ways of doing things, it does not mean that it will come, it is not part of our natural behavior, or it is not that we do not do it naturally. Yes, it is part of our natural behavior and we do it naturally, but it is a certain chronology, a certain sequencing of natural behavior, which sometimes may be exaggerated, sometimes, not always, but that sometimes exaggerated, always also. That's a beautiful line, but it comes from a very natural sort of a behavior. Now, when you say that what was the 19th century's theatre and how what happens on a professional stage. Now, even today in 2025, when you go to Kamani or when you go to a lot of renowned theaters in Delhi, Akshara, Kamani, or this Mandi House, entire Mandi House area, and when you go and watch plays, majority, I am not saying always, in 2025, if I talk about 1990, if I talk about 1900, maybe always. So, when you talk about or when you read not ultra modern, before ultra modern theatre, then you realize that if an action starts, it is bound to complete, and once it is completed, then only it is the starting of the next shot or the next scene. Shot is something which exclusively belongs to cinema, and scene belongs to theatre and cinema both. But here we really have to understand the basic difference between theatre and filmmaking. We have, when it comes to cinema, we have borrowed a lot of things from literature, painting, music, theatre, different style of dances, different style of different mediums pre-existing cinema. So, that is why cinema is called the culmination of all the mediums. Thank you very much.